Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for our special 40th anniversary webinar presentation with Dr. Fumi Arakawa. My name is Taylor Hasbrook, and I am the Community Outreach Manager here at Crow Canyon Archaeological Center, and I will be your moderator this afternoon. I will just get us started with a brief slideshow before we get to the talk. I would like to take a moment to share our land acknowledgement. The Crow Canyon Archaeological Center acknowledges the Pueblo, Ute, Paiute, Dene, and Jicarilla Apache people on whose traditional homeland this institution sits. Our mission-related work would not be possible without Indigenous people in the past, present, and future. We respectfully recognize and honor ancestral and descendant Indigenous communities for their contributions to all humankind. Crow Canyon is grateful to all Indigenous people and supports the preservation and protection of cultural traditions, ancestral connections, and sacred lands. As many of you may know, Crow Canyon is celebrating 40 years of research, innovation, and collaboration in 2023. We gratefully invite you to join us in celebrating our 40th anniversary this year. We will be hosting our 40th anniversary on campus from October 11th through October 15th. Poet laureate Joy Harjo and Indigenous community organizer, scholar, and musician Lila June will be our keynote speakers. Additionally, we will be running field trips throughout the greater Cortez area, as well as having an assortment of speakers and activities taking place on our campus. To learn more and register for this event, please visit our website. We are deeply grateful to the Crow Canyon community for the kindness and generosity that allows us to celebrate, appreciate, and reciprocate the wisdom and perspective that we have received from Indigenous people. On behalf of the entire Crow Canyon family, we just want to extend a huge thank you to you, our Crow Canyon community. We couldn't do it without the continued support of our mission. While I'm sure most of us are familiar with Zoom, I would just like to take a moment to cover some of the basics. Please add all of your questions to the Q&A tab at the bottom of the screen. If you add them to the chat, they run the possibility of getting buried, and we want to make sure we have the opportunity to get to all your questions at the end. If you have any difficulties on Zoom, we encourage you to head over to our live stream on Facebook, which can be found at crowcanyon.org/Facebook. And if you have missed any of our past webinars, you can find those all on our YouTube channel, where we'll also be posting this afternoon's event. We host webinars every Thursday, so we want to take a moment to share with you some of our upcoming events. Next week, on Thursday, April 13th, we will be hosting Keely Toledo on the topic of pipelines and how water is life. The following week, we'll be hosting our first Four Corners Lecture Series event with Dr. Weston McCool on Fremont territoriality and resource defense in 9 Mile Canyon, located in southeastern Utah. We hope to see you there. Without further ado, I am happy to announce this afternoon's talk. Fumi is the director of the University Museum and professor of anthropology at New Mexico State University. He is also a research associate with the Crow Canyon Archaeological Center and a senior researcher with the Village Ecodynamics Project. His primary interest is reconstructing sociopolitical organization among the ancestral Puebloans in the Mesa Verde and northern Mimbres regions. His research examines how social scales and power change through time in small-scale agricultural societies of the American Southwest using demographic, environmental, and material data. To tackle questions of power and scale, he has gained a strong background in archaeological methods and theories, geology, and chemical compositional analyses. He has also explored topics relating to multivocal studies in archaeology, cultural trajectory, gender, division of labor, and exchange systems. Welcome, Fumi.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So now I'm going to share my PowerPoint and make sure that I get the laser pointer. All right. Can you hear me okay? Tyler, good?
Yep, you're coming through clear, but I don't have your PowerPoint just yet.
Oh yeah, because I didn't share. Sorry. All right. Where is that? Yeah, sorry. Almost getting there. All right. Share screen. Share. All right, and then PowerPoint, and then PowerPoint.
Wonderful, we can see it now.
Great, and laser. All right, thank you very much for giving me such a wonderful introduction, Taylor. I truly appreciate it. And good evening, everyone. Like Tara mentioned or indicated, I first would like to honor all the ancestral stewards of the land in the Four Corners area and their descendants living in over 30 tribes and nations and communities or native villages. Okay. So I'm so honored to present the topic that's lithic studies in the Central Mesopotamia region tonight. And some people who are listening to my talk now might remember that I used to work at the Crow Canyon as a laboratory specialist from 2008 to 2011. And in these photos showing here, you are seeing the happy faces of some Crow Canyon participants while I was working at the Crow Canyon. So importantly, without the support of Crow Canyon staff, participants, interns, volunteers, and many others, I could not share the result of our research tonight. So I just want to say thank you very much for all of them. So my main theme in this presentation is to address the lithic studies in sedentary agricultural societies, focus on case studies of the Central Mesopotamia region. And Central Mesopotamia region pretty much covers the most of the areas in the Four Corners area, showing here. So whenever I say the Central Mesopotamia region, it means this area in the Four Corners area. And in order to address the main theme, I'll talk about three subtopics. First, the history of lithic studies at the Crow Canyon Archaeological Center. Second, a case study from the Central Mesopotamia region. And this talk is based on the content and context of our book chapter in research, education, and American-Indian partnerships at the Crow Canyon Archaeological Center, which celebrates the Crow Canyon's 40th anniversary. And Jamie Mayweather, she's a laboratory specialist or laboratory person at the Crow Canyon. And Kay Hugh, she's also working in laboratory settings there. And I wrote this paper, and our book chapter will be published in June. And finally, I'd share like three key takeaways from my talk tonight. So basically, those are the 3 points I just want to emphasize throughout this presentation. So before I begin talking about lithic studies in the Central Mesopotamia region, I would like to define what lithics mean. And it is not a geological term. So if you talk to somebody, especially geologists, and then you said, I'm interested in lithics, and then those geologists probably say, what? Because the lithic is a term only used by anthropologists and archaeologists. And for us, the lithics means anything about stone tools and their debris, and manufactured, used, and discarded by humans in the past, or maybe in the present too. And lithic studies have approximately 4.2 million years of history. And just, surprising thing is that in contrast, the pottery is approximately 12,000 years old. So we can deal with a long time span of past human behaviors using lithic data. Since lithics are universal artifacts, so you can study anywhere. If you want to work in old world or new world, you can pretty much deal with lithics, and you might be able to understand how those people lived in the past. So it's a universal artifact. So those lithic studies should be pretty cool. So now switch gears and now to discuss how Crow Canyon Archaeological Center, or I'm going to just call it Crow Canyon, has effectively developed and implemented lithic analysis over past 40 years. And most lithic assemblages recovered from Crow Canyon's excavations originated from the agricultural sedentary villages dating from Basketmaker III to Pueblo III periods. That's we are talking about 8,500 to 1300s. Unlike lithic studies in the hunter-gathering societies, the lithic assemblages derived from agricultural societies, particularly in the American Southwest, have been neglected, in my opinion. And then there are so many ideas why, not many people actually focusing on or interested in studying lithics. And I'd like to provide, I'd like to briefly provide 3 potential reasons regarding this subject, why people neglected lithic studies. The one major reason is that there are too many of them. For example, the yellow jacket Pueblo debitage assemblage consists of more than 12,000 pieces of debitage. In contrast, in a hunting-gathering lithic assemblage, there are probably like hundreds of chipped stone materials, but no more than 10,000 pieces. So we are just dealing with too many flakes and debitage. And the second point I want to make is, some people feel or think that lithic study is just not fancy, or they think like crude and clumsy. And for example, when people analyze project points recovered from agricultural society in American Southwest, these points are mostly like small side or corner notch points, and they are not like fancy, fluted points like Folsom or Clovis. And then finally, some people might just say it's boring, nothing we can learn from it kind of attitude. And instead, many archaeologists believe that we can learn more about past human behaviors by studying pottery or faunal remains. And we contended that, lithic studies offer a great deal of knowledge pertaining to sociopolitical organization in ancestral Pueblo society, including the mobility and territoriality and trade, and also understand the development of political autonomy over time. So I hope to demonstrate how we can address these themes throughout this presentation. Something happened. All right. So archaeologists in American Southwest have long investigated changes in community organization. In the central Mesoamerican region, the sediment analysis indicates that cultural trajectory of agricultural societies went through 2 major cycles of dispersion and aggregation. And this figure shows how the momentary population changed over time. So what you are seeing here is the x-axis indicate time, like time through time, and then y-axis indicate the momentary population. That means how many people might have lived in a particular time period. And also you can see 4 different time periods, such as Basketmaker III here, P1, P2, and P3, marked on this figure. So the first beginning during the Basketmaker III, I'm talking about from AD 600 to 750 period, and ending with the Pueblo I period, that's AD 750 to 900 period. And the second from the Pueblo II period, from AD 900 to 1050 period, to the Pueblo III period, that's AD 1050 to 1300 period. So as you can see, population increased and then dispersed. So we see those 2 different population dynamics in the Mesoamerican region. So now let's briefly take a look at how culture in the central Mesoamerican region changed over time. And during the first cycle in the Basketmaker III period, the ancestral Pueblo people lived in relatively dispersed sediment clusters. Okay, I'm getting like unable to establish secure connection to Zoom. Are you guys listening to me?
You're still coming through clear.
Okay, I'm getting the message so many times, so I kind of worried. All right, so going back to the Basketmaker III time, people lived in a pit house and shown in the right photo. This was constructed by Crow Canyon people at the Crow Canyon campus. Come on, okay. So although the Basketmaker III sediments are most dispersed in the central Mesoamerican region, there's one example where these households occurred in conjunction with public architecture, that is a great kiva at the derived site. So the Basketmaker III community project and multifaceted research and public education initiatives conducted by Crow Canyon from 2011 to 2017 examines the derived site and the surrounding settlements, and it represents one of the best examples of the Basketmaker III period community center in the region. And from the late 8700s to 900s, there was a major transition in settlement organization in the central Mesa Verde region. Again, the Pueblo I period represents one of two population peaks with aggregation into large villages. So the first use of above ground architecture in the form of adobe slab line contiguous room blocks was formed around various pit structures. And the photo on the left shows a recreation of a Pueblo I village at the Mesa Verde National Park. And the photo on the right here, shows Site 13 on the Arakawa Ridge, which is one of the largest villages in the western portion of the central Mesa Verde region. So by the early 8900s or so, the first cycle of aggregation ended in the region. So during the 10th and the early 11th centuries, population density declined in the central Mesa Verde region. The population decline corresponded with the earliest construction of great houses in Chaco Canyon, and several authors have speculated that the ancestral Pueblo people moved out of the central Mesa Verde region and migrated south and contributed to the demographic buildup that triggers coalescence in Chaco Canyon. So some scholars just, thinks that maybe the depopulation of the Mesa Verde region around 900, some of the people might went to south and help construct those large villages in Chaco Canyon. So from AD 1020 to 1140, the Chaco great houses were constructed in the central Mesa Verde region, such as Henny Site, Wallace Ruin, and Escalante Ruin. Interestingly, based on the lithic data, there was more interregional interaction and trade between the people in the central Mesa Verde region and Chaco Canyon during that time. So it seems like the territory or the exchange system was more open during the Pueblo II period. And ancestral Pueblo people in the central Mesa Verde region experienced dramatic cultural change during the post-Chaco era or the Pueblo III period. And this includes the increase in population, an increase in conflict and warfare, a shift in settlement location from the top of mesa to canyon settings, the development of the largest aggregated villages in the region, and then finally, the depopulation of the region at the end of the 13th century AD. So during the AD 1200s, the large aggregated villages and the politically complex social organizations were apparent in the region, as evidenced by sites investigated by Crow Canyon, such as Sand Canyon Pueblo, Gunman Point Pueblo, Yellow Jacket Pueblo, and others. And population increased in the region between AD 1140 and 1280. However, the long distance trade declined based on the low frequency of non-local pottery in site assemblages from that time period. In addition, the faunal remains and the frequency of projector points compared to other artifact classes recovered from the central areas of the region indicates that the residents did not often participate in large game hunting. Rather, those people relied on small animals such as rabbits or lagmos and domesticated turkey to acquire protein. There's also no evidence that they obtained large game through exchange with other regions during the AD 1200s. So in other words, the localized interregional, that means near neighbor exchange, might have intensified during the AD 1200s. So the decline of items obtained from long distance exchange and intensified interregional exchange, suggesting that the central Mesa Verde region was politically autonomous during the 13th century AD. That means many large villages became totally isolated. So the lack of long distance exchange during this time differs from area time periods when a more long distance exchange of materials occurred. So I'm talking about during the Pueblo II period. So in our book chapter, we try to evaluate whether ancestral Pueblo people in the study area show political autonomy during the AD 1200s by analyzing chipped stone data. To achieve this goal, I began by discussing how Crow Canyon researchers develop a lithic analysis methodology first. So lithic studies studied at the Crow Canyon researchers, beginning with archaeological research at the Darkfoot site from 1985 to 1991. And by the way, it is important to note that some of the Crow Canyon researchers, who worked at the Darkfoot site, those people are also participating in the Dolores Archaeological Project, the DAP, in the early 1980s. So those people continue to use and adapt the DAP's lithic analysis as well as, lithic analysis as well. So please keep in mind. So in the Darkfoot research, the Crow Canyon researchers, interns, and participants excavated entire structures and meadows and recovered tens of thousands of artifacts dating to the Pueblo I period. I'm talking about AD 750 to 900. And during lithic analysis, the Crow Canyon researchers analyzed formal tools such as projector points, biface, and drills, and informal tools such as pecking stones, modified flakes, and utilized flakes. And they analyzed lithic debitage and classified these artifacts by local or non-local material type. They determine local as those materials that could be procured within a 25-kilometer radius of the site, and non-local materials as materials that could be procured beyond a 25-kilometer radius. And importantly, they linked the type of stone with geological formations when classifying raw material types. Sorry, I got some kind of allergies. So for example, the Morrison claystone, mudstone, siltstone, and chert were identified as the rocks that were derived from Morrison Formation from Jurassic period. So talking about those, so whenever we find some rocks from Brushy Basin, then we name that rock material as Brushy Basin chert or something like that. And Dakota Quartzite was named for the Dakota Formation here in the Cretaceous period from which they came. And non-local rocks were also identified, such as obsidian, Navona pasture, and red jasper. The presence of these materials suggesting that they were procured by long-distance trade. And for debitage, the Crow Canyon researchers recorded general morphology categories, including flakes with or without platforms, edge-damaged flakes, and others. After completing the Darkfoot site assemblage, the Crow Canyon researchers continued to follow similar formal tool analysis methods, with the exception of debitage for the San Canyon Pueblo, Yellow Jacket Pueblo, and Woods Canyon Pueblo assemblages. So basically, those Crow Canyon researchers did not analyze debitage for a while. However, when they began working at the Shields Pueblo in 1998, the Crow Canyon researchers introduced a new way of analyzing debitage, which was called mass analysis, originally proposed by Stanley Eller in 1989. So this method focused on identifying material type, size grading into 4 categories, such as 1 inch, ½ inch, quarter inch, and smaller than quarter inch, identifying the presence or absence of cortex, and recording the count and weight. So importantly, the mass analysis allows research to analyze a large debitage assemblages efficiently and easily. So in other words, all participants who come to the Crow Canyon programs, as well as high school kids or K-12 students, they can actually use this method to analyze debitage. So Crow Canyon researchers adapted this method of analysis in the late 1990s, and it is still used in debitage analysis today. So with assistance from Crow Canyon researchers, I analyzed the Yellow Jacket Pueblo 5MT5 chipped stone assemblage for my thesis research from 1998 to 2000. And one goal of my research was to define which local, semi-local, and non-local raw materials were used at the Yellow Jacket Pueblo. So to achieve this goal, I conducted a reconnaissance of local lithic sources and quarries around the Yellow Jacket Canyon and redefined local raw material types, including rocks from the Morrison, Crow Canyon, and Dakota formations. And then in collaboration with Kim Garher, she's a local geologist, and David Gonzalez, a geology professor at the Fort Lewis College. And I continue to define and classify raw material types for the broader Central Mesa Valley region until the early 2000s. And we visited several quarry sites and geological outcrops. And I also visited approximately 90 quarries or lithic sourcing areas in the region from the late 1990s to early 2000s by myself. So for 40 years, the Crow Canyon has devoted time and energy to developing its own chipped stone analysis. And these analyses are innovated because Crow Canyon researchers delved into sourcing studies and associated raw material types with local and regional lithologies. And data derived from sourcing studies allow researchers, including me, to explore several topics regarding socio-political organizations in pre-Hispanic agricultural societies. So if you are interested in this subject, the lithics in agricultural societies, please go to my academic.com website and please read them. And by the way, one of my grad students, Jessica Weinmeister, just defended her thesis research, and she focused on colors in chipped stone tools recovered from one of the largest Pueblo I and Pueblo II sites in the Central Mesa Valley region. So the major contribution of her research is that she investigated non-functional aspect of stone tool use. And this kind of lithic study would be important to explore for many other archaeologists in the future. And I will talk a little bit about non-functional chipstone analysis at the end of my presentation. So please bear with me. And by the way, if you know Jamie Mayweather, this is Daniel Hampson. This is the son of Jamie. So both of them are my students, and then they just defended. So they're gonna graduate this semester. Okay, now let's change gears and take a look at lithic studies in the Central Mesa Valley region. And this map shows the locations of the sites and their lithic assemblages used in this study. So pretty much, I didn't talk look at all sites in the Central Mesa Valley region, but we just looking at the sites that Crow Canyon excavated in the past and today. So Jamie Mayweather and Kate Hughes and I compiled the chipstone data from 12 sites and 15 chronological components from the Macayamo Yellow Jacket District in the Central Mesa Valley region. And we analyzed lithic assemblages which the Crow Canyon excavated, such as Yellow Jacket right here, and San Canyon Pueblo, and Woods Canyon Pueblo right there, and then Shields Pueblos, and Castle Rocks, Haney site, Dillard site, and others. And most of these sites are classified as community centers in the Pueblo II and the Pueblo III periods. And community centers are large sites that have long occupation spans and often contain public architecture, such as great kivas. And the Basketmaker III and the Pueblo I period sites are from small habitations. sorry, showing so many words and so many terms, but I just want to go through each things and you understand what kind of methods we used. So in terms of methodology, we use counts, not weight, to collect data on both tools and debitage. And we also investigated tools, talking about here, including cores, picking stones, project points, biface, and drills, and debitage using 5 raw material categories. Those include local high quality material, local low quality material, semi-local material, non-local material, and other stone material types. And we were interested in broader patterns of toolstone procurement patterns through time. So we aggregated these data into Basketmaker III, P1, P2, P3 periods. And we used only contexts that could be confidentially assigned to one of these time periods. And most of the debitage were derived from the maiden context. And among the 5 raw material categories, the local materials are classified as either high or low quality materials. The high quality local materials include the agate, calcine, Cretaceous Dakota, Broad Canyon quartzite, and Cretaceous Broad Canyon chert. And these types are commonly used in a formal tool production, such as projector points and bifacial tools. And their qualities are well-known, recorded, and relatively ubiquitous in that study area, except the agate and calcine. And these qualities fall within the 18 kilometers of most villages in the study area. And now take a look at low quality. This means less satisfied sedimentary rocks and local materials. And those include Morrison Formation rocks, silicified siltstone, mudstone, chert, silicified sandstone. And then we also classified semi-local materials. Those include Jurassic Morrison brushy basin chert and igneous materials. And both of these medium quality materials can be sourced. So the source of Jurassic Morrison brushy basin chert, what we usually call as a brushy basin chert, are mostly found in the southwestern portion of the study area. It's near the Four Corners Monument. And while the igneous materials are in the southern portion of the study area, close to and on Ute Mountains. And both sources are more than 18 kilometers away from the nearest community centers in the study, except for the Castle Rock Pueblo. And obsidian, Navajo pasture, red jasper, and non-local chat and siltstone materials, those are classified as non-local materials. And obsidian materials are usually procured from sources more than 300 kilometers away, including sources in the northern Rio Grande region, and Mount Taylor in New Mexico, and sources near Flagstaff in northern Arizona. And Navajo pasture can be traced to the Chusca Mountains in New Mexico, and approximately 140 kilometers away. And red jaspers materials are most likely procured from areas near Cedar Mesa in southwestern Utah, approximately 100 kilometers away. The non-local chert and siltstone categories is used for raw material types not found in the local or semi-local areas, and they often include very high quality materials for using for making projector points and bifaces. So just keep in mind, those are the methods. I know there are so many writings here, but just, bear with me. And then I'm going to show us some results now. So results, this figure illustrates the proportion of cores here, picking stones, and formal tools, including projector points, biface, and drills. And those are recovered from the Crow Canyon excavated sites based on 5 different raw material types, including local high, local low, semi-local, non-local, and others. And then on the left side, that's a Basketmaker III, P1, P2, and P3. So most cores take a look at cores and the picking stone now. So most cores and the picking stones consist of local low quality materials with only a few examples from local high quality material here and there. And then for the project points, biface, and drills, local high quality materials right here, right there, and right there were most frequently used, although the local low quality material and non-local material here and that are relatively also used. And this figure shows the overall result of debitage analysis from the Crow Canyon excavated sites based on the 5 different raw material types during the Basketmaker III to Pueblo III period. So x-axis shows the full time period. Again, Basketmaker III, P1, P2, P3, and also showing 5 different raw material types: high quality, low quality material, so forth. And then y-axis shows the proportion of these raw material types. So the majority of debitage materials consist of local low quality materials, followed by the local high quality material. The proportion of semi-local right here, non-local, and then other raw material types is low. So I know there's so much information and you might get confused, but please pay attention to this figure now. Then I hope that you understand what I'm talking about. So to better understand the broad pattern of each raw material type, we created this figure showing the proportion of debitage based on each raw material type over time. So this one shows the x-axis, the time period, Basketmaker III through P3, and then y-axis shows proportion. And this result reveals interesting patterns. First, take a look at the top figure here, local high quality material. Although the percentage of local high quality material types do not change much in the Basketmaker III, P2, and then P3 periods, the highest amount of local high quality material was used during the Pueblo I period. In addition, this figure shows a slight increase in these materials from Pueblo II to Pueblo III periods. And now take a look at the second figure here. So the ancestral Pueblo people of the Basketmaker III period use the most local low quality materials of all time period. And then now take a look at these semi-local materials here. And semi-local material types, especially brushy basin chert. So I even call semi-local materials, but we are mostly talking about brushy basin cherts because brushy basin chert consists of 107,924 pieces total. And then igneous materials consist of 922. So we are mostly talking about the brushy basin chert. So brushy basin material were most commonly used during the Pueblo II period, showing here. And then finally, take a look at non-local materials. The ancestral Pueblo people acquired non-local material types more commonly during the Pueblo I period, right here. Also, there was a slight increase in these materials from Pueblo II to Pueblo III periods. And this result shows that the Pueblo III period had the highest use of non-local material types. I'm talking about debitage here, not tools. And there was not what we expected before this analysis was carried out, indeed. So this research demonstrates several aspects of lithic procurement and indirectly sociopolitical organization in a study area from AD 600 to 1300. The first, the study of raw material types when associated with their lithological and geological formations, help reconstruct where and how ancestral Pueblo people procured their lithic raw materials. So since Crow Canyon researchers have accurately developed a detailed analysis of lithology in a study area, studies focus on mobility and territoriality and resource acquisitions are possible. And for example, the increasing proportion of brushy basin chert, do you remember now, like peak of that during a Pueblo II period, reveals the ancestral Pueblo people procured and used this particular raw material type for special purposes. Although the quality of this material is equivalent to other local high quality materials such as agate or calcene, they prefer to acquire brushy basin chert despite being located more than 18 kilometers away from the nearest community center, with the exception of Castle Rock Pueblo. And interestingly, the brushy basin chert materials were typically used for chamahillas production. This is, people think about this, tool was used for agricultural tools, such as used as a hoe. And these tools may have been used for ceremonial or ritual purposes, as noted by Person in her study of the Hopi. So Person, pretty much study the Hopis, and then those Hopi people use this chamahia tool as a ritual or religious purposes based on ethnographic studies. In addition, the high proportion of brushy basin chert utilized the Pueblo II period suggests frequent mobility and or interaction between those in the study area and the inhabitants in or near the brushy basin quarries of the Four Corners Monument area. In short, the proportion of brushy basin chert exponentially increased during the Pueblo II period, and this suggesting the inter-regional interaction or trade increase in the Pueblo II period in the study area. The result of debitage analysis based on raw material types indicates that tourism procurement of local high-quality materials increased from the Pueblo II to the Pueblo III period, while the proportion of semi-local materials decreased. And this might indicate that ancestral Pueblo people rely heavily on chipped stone raw materials close to their habitation areas and preferred not to travel or encroach on the territories of other groups. The reduction and or restriction of territories or territorialities might suggest that during the Pueblo III period, there is evidence for political autonomy in tandem with inter-regional interaction, mobility, and or migration. However, it is important to note that though, the proportion of non-local materials, including obsidian, red jasper, Nabonapaz, and non-local chert and siltstone, increased slightly from the Pueblo II to the Pueblo III period. And this indicates that although people experience political autonomy and increased inter-regional or near neighborhood interaction within the study area, they also developed alliances and social networks, signaling a strong cooperation with communities in areas to the south, such as Northern Rio Grande region in New Mexico. The slight increase in the proportion of non-local material types is also seen in the formal tools as well. So it is interesting that even though those people, communities seems like isolated, during the Pueblo III period, but they still had some interactions or alliances with, people from pretty far away, such as southern portion of New Mexico. So this study demonstrates that lithic studies can provide reliable and essential data for understanding and reconstructing socio-political organization, including mobility, territoriality, and trade in agricultural societies. And this is attainable because Crow Canyon researchers have developed a reliable and repeatable lithic raw material classification system over the last 40 years. In addition, Crow Canyon has developed a large and variable lithic database. And I just want to emphasize that, although Crow Canyon's lithic database is rich, very, very rich, only a few researchers have utilized it for research, unfortunately. So lithic studies are informative because we can pinpoint potential sourcing areas at the local and regional scales. In contrast, think about pottery studies. Yeah, you might be able to pinpoint where those materials came from, but the pottery studies might be difficult to pinpoint potential sourcing areas because there are many, many variables that you have to think about, including clay, temper, slip, and/or paint. And then those things should be considered in order for researcher to figure out the geochemical similarities and differences. But lithics, you can just study those raw material types and you can actually pinpoint where those came from. As this study demonstrates, the researchers can use the proportion of tools and debitage assemblages to eliminate toolstone procurement patterns. And by doing so, these data also help us reconstruct the development of political autonomy in agricultural societies through time. Indeed, it is interesting to think about this phenomena. This was actually proposed by Tim Cotter when I got into a PhD program at the Washington State, and I talked about these patterns like during the Pueblo III period. It seems like those villages or people who live in the large villages got so isolated from other villages or communities. So like when the scale or population increases, we generally expect that people try to expand and develop more interregional trade networks with the long distance communities because we can gain more resources, we have more alliances, and so forth. But this did not happen in the Central Mesa Valley region. So this phenomena is very still interesting to me. And then this is probably a rare kind of phenomena or situation we can see in archaeological records as well. So before I'm going to close my talk, I just want to talk about like what else can we do or explore regarding lithic studies in agricultural societies. Of course, there are many things we can do, but as I briefly mentioned about non-functional aspects of stone tool use, like Jessica Weinmeister's color studies in lithics, I think we can further explore that subject. That means non-functional aspect of chipped stone tools. So for example, the one potential approach in lithic study is to carry out the multivocal studies or using a multivocal approach. And for example, two Zuni elders, as you can see here, the Octavius here, Octavius Sewatua, and Gilbert Yuselu, standing those here, and Steve Shackley right here talking to them. He's a doctor, Southwest Obsidian, and two Gila National Forest archaeologists and one local archaeologist. And I conducted the Mill Creek Obsidian Quarry research last November. And Steve Shackley, if you know him pretty well, he has been working at the Mill Creek Obsidian Quarries for over 40 years. So he knows so much about that area. So two Zuni elders have never visited the Mill Creek Obsidian Quarry. Thus, it was eye-opening for them. And they told us that they could reconnect with that area where their ancestors visited and procure the sacred symbolic materials very well. So I argue that this kind of study can be further conducted between archaeologists and indigenous people or source community members. Like, for example, we can visit other obsidian quarries in the American Southwest, such as Mount Taylor, Hemas Mountains, and others with those source community members in the future. So now I'd like to give you 3 key takeaways regarding lithic studies in sedentary agricultural societies. So lithic studies can be one tool to reveal sociopolitical organization in agricultural studies, societies. And lithic studies in the central Mesa Valley region indicate interesting patterns, particularly the procurement of semi-local materials. I'm talking about brushy basin chert during the Pueblo II period. And this result help us understand and reconstruct that subject of mobility, territoriality, and interaction. And finally, the lithic studies further needed to be embraced by multifaceted ways of describing and interpreting past human behaviors. Those include probably multivocal approach and color studies in chipstone tools like Jessica Weinmeister's thesis study and others. And finally, I just want to say thank you very much to all Crow Canyon staff and Board of Trustees, Pueblo Advisory Group, Ricky Lightfoot, he was former Crow Canyon president, Mark Varian, Scott Altman, Debbie Fish, Paul Emagiari, Margie Connolly, Susan Ryan, Becky Hammond, my older sister, and Jamie Mayweather, Bill Leip, my mentor, and Tim Cotter, my mentor, and many, many other people. And without these people's support, especially my visa issues or my visa situations in 2008, some of you probably know, but I could not carry out any archaeological research in the American Southwest, or I could not be here tonight. So all of you saved me, and I hope that I will continue to contribute and support Crow Canyon research, education, and American Indian initiatives directly or indirectly until I die, or maybe 40 more years. But I don't think I can live that long though. But thank you very much. That's what I have.
Thank you so much for your presentation. That was incredibly interesting, and I'm really excited to get to some of these questions that people have sent in. I'll start us off with one that is both a comment and a question. It says, thank you so much for your detailed presentation. I work as an archaeologist in Japan, but I often go camping and backpacking in the Mesa Verde region and have encountered ancestral Pueblo and stone tool debitage myself. I assumed lithic materials in the region had been carefully studied already. What caused you to start looking closely at this understudied topic? What are the next steps for this study? For instance, can the Central Mesa Verde data be compared with similar studies in other ancestral Puebloan cultural centers?
So just one question I have is that person living in Japan and he's a Japanese citizen, or is he an American person living in Japan?
I will give them the opportunity to add that into the chat since I am unfamiliar with this individual off the top of my head. So I will give her a moment to respond to that question.
Yeah. So in terms of the, so basically, the person is asking me about what else can we do about lithic studies and then why I got interested in lithic studies. So
exactly.
I'm gonna answer the first question, like why I got interested in lithic studies. So probably people, who goes to universities, not in the American Southwest. So I got my bachelor's and master's at the University of Idaho, and then I got my PhD from Washington State. And those universities emphasize what they are, very strong program regarding lithic studies. So I didn't learn anything about pottery. I learned something about faunal remains and others, but in those institutions located in Pacific Northwest or Columbia Plateau, they're just mostly talking about lithics. So pretty much, when I was undergraduate and master's, I pretty much, got interested in lithics because of the atmosphere. But then after I started working at the Crow Canyon, the Mark Valerian, my mentor, said, I don't know, I can quote it or not, but he just said, Fumi, you cannot survive if you don't know anything about pottery. So after he told me, I started studying more about pottery, analysis. But just, I tried to answer the question. So the background, where I went to, and then the program I got into, and also when I was undergraduate students, we went to a field trip to Grass Butte, Oregon, that's just wonderful obsidian quarry sites. You kind of see all obsidian all over. And then when I visited the quarry, grass-built obsidian quarry, then I got so interested in, all right, how those stone tools were used by, people in the past. So kind of similar questions. And then after I came to Southwest, I started asking that similar question. And then second of all, the person asked me about what else we can do. I think I mentioned that, maybe non-functional aspect of chipped stone analysis would be pretty interesting. Because like a lot of like PhD students nowadays, they start talking about colors, like paints, minerals, rocks, and what else? Soils and so forth. So then those people tended to believe that, if we want to really understand how those objects or items were used by the, past humans, then we have to get into understand the, potency or animacy. Maybe those objects, have some kind of spirits in it. And if we can kind of think about that way, then we probably going to open another thing and we can see, those archaeological records in a different way. And I got influenced by this kind of perspective by my colleagues here, the Bill Walker. He does rituals and religions in the American Southwest. So if you are interested in it, you can read his stuff. And then I hope that other people, might be able to embrace these non-functional aspects of stone tool analysis. That means that, if we have a lot of obsidians in, central Mesoamerica region, and those materials we find those at the, those sites are not only functional reasons. That means the distance from one side to the quarry does not matter much. But we have to kind of, think about more. And then those maybe obsidian materials might be a very important object, or maybe, potent, animacy or object agency. And then that's why those people had it, or something like that. So I think that's another way. And of course, if you are, interested in functional analysis, I think we still need to compile a lot of lithic data set. And, I'm working at the museum at the New Mexico State, and then we have probably more than 500 boxes of, lithic assemblages. And nobody has touched them since they excavated. They put those stuff in the boxes. Nobody has touched them since probably 1970s or 1980s. So, we can probably reanalyze those collections and then develop a nice or good database.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. So we'll get into a couple of more questions more specific to the talk.
Sure.
How much did population density influence exchange of raw materials?
Yeah, I mean, if you know something about like hunter-gathering societies, and then people are living in a band level organization, the anthropologists, ethnographers, archaeologists tend to believe that those people lived in such a small population density. It's we usually say about 100 or 150 people maximum. So if you are living in such a small scale society, then those people probably travel many different areas very easily. But if you are living in like a central Mesoamerica region, and then they were agriculturists around, for example, 1200s, based on the village ecodynamics projects, archaeologists estimates that there are probably 12 to 20,000 people living in that region. So if you think about that scale, then, how far those people can travel would be probably minimum, because those people are sedentary people, right? No hunter-gatherers or mobile people. So they are pretty much settled, and they spend so much time and energy for cultivating their agricultural products. So their mobility was more reduced. So I think I hope I answered that question.
Yeah, and going off of that, were you able to find whether a community tended to trade lithic materials with another community, suggesting that the two communities were allied with each other?
We wish we can do that. But if you analyze the like a debitage assemblage from one large villages dating to 80 1200s, we probably have if you have a 12,000 pieces of debitage at the Yellow Jacket Pueblo, you probably have about 9,000 10,000 Morrison materials. And then those non-local, semi-local materials probably consist of 2,000. If you have it, that's lucky. So in that case, Morrison rocks, we have so many Morrison rocks, and if we can identify where those rocks came from in the Morrison Formation in a Jurassic period, it would be great. But it is just no way to do a geochemical analysis and a pinpoint. Okay, these Morrison materials came from this canyon, or this material came from another canyon, or something like that. And then another important thing is the Morrison Formation, for example, exists from the Canada, northern portion of Canada, through Oklahoma, if I believe right. So the Morrison Formation, exists along the pretty much Colorado Plateau. So even, we assume that those Morrison materials are procured from local setting. It might be came from, other areas. We just cannot tell. And then there's no way to kind of pinpoint and then do a geochemical analysis of local materials yet.
Wonderful. So we will close out since we're right at 5 p.m. with kind of a broader question here. The lithic graphs of the debitage through the 4 time periods show a large difference in all categories for the Pueblo I period when compared to the Basketmaker III and Pueblo II periods. Do you have any conclusions as to why the big difference with the Pueblo I materials in regards to the socio-political landscape?
So that's a great question. I didn't pay attention to it. But one thing I can say is that, do you remember in the beginning of my talk, there are two aggregation and dispersion took place from 600 to 1300. So the Pueblo I period, there are more, high quality materials probably existed, because probably, during that time, people kind of start aggregating it. People were kind of getting together from other areas. And I think that might be a reason that we see high frequency of those materials during the Pueblo I. But then Pueblo II, Pueblo III, as I said, probably due to a population density or due to intensive agricultural practice, those people became more isolated. So I hope maybe that's I only can think of about why we have relatively high quality materials during that Pueblo I period.
All right, I'm gonna throw you one more question because
sure.
Ben Bellarato just texted me and he wants.
God.
I know. I figured you'd be excited about this.
How come he's not there? I was almost congratulate. Yeah, but go ahead.
He says, "Ask Fumi what his favorite lithic material is and why."
That's a good question. I like jasper. Be honest, the red, and then those are just beautiful. And then brushy basin chert is also cool, and then Navona Pass chert, the pinkish chert is great. But I think I would say jasper is my probably favorite, and I don't know why. It's just so nice color, texture, and just a color of red is just kind of my favorite.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that little tidbit of information with us.
How about you, Taylor? What kind of rocks do you like?
I mean, I like jade a lot just because I'm very drawn to green, so I'm very biased towards that. But I try not to have any biases on my rocks. I love them all for their own unique reasons. Well, I just wanted to.
Yeah, before I'm gonna say I'm sorry, I got some kind of allergies, and then I just it was like kind of hard to talk to, so I just apologize. Sorry.
No reason to apologize. You did absolutely wonderful this afternoon, and we are so thankful that you are willing to present with us as part of our 40th anniversary. So thank you so much for doing this for us. It was a pleasure to have you back, and we really look forward to what your next 40 years of research is going to look like.
Yeah, before I die. Probably.
Well, thank you so much.
All right. Thank you so much.
And we hope to see all of you guys next week. Thanks for joining us.
All right. Thank you.
Bye, everyone.